Hello and welcome to another episode of the Your Way podcast. So those of you who have been on for a while and are watching today may recognize my guest, Charlotte Williams. So Charlotte has been on, I think you've been on twice. You've been on as a, no, or three times.
Twice. This is my third time.
Okay. Lovely to have you. I wasn't sure if you'd done two of the group ones.
One group, one individual.
Well, it's lovely to have you back for the third time. So Charlotte is one of my clients, and I've asked her to come on today because Charlotte's done some amazing, amazing work, not just with me, in the past few years about really deeply connecting in with herself, building self-trust, and then connecting in with the real magic of who she is. And I think our first podcast was called something along the lines of having a life I love. Like it was along those lines. And for me, this feels like a really lovely next step in that process of really deepening that connection with who you are. So, Charlotte, it's lovely to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back.
It's an absolute pleasure. So, when you think about self-trust, because it's a topic that gets bandied about an awful lot, I use it a lot. Lots of people use it a lot. What does self-trust mean to you? Because it could mean, it could mean multiple things to multiple people.
I think ultimately at the heart of it is trusting your instincts, like training and trusting your instincts. We all know when things don't feel right, but it's very easy to disconnect from that and switch off. So self-trust for me is really tuning into and connecting with what feels right in my body and just following that and trusting that something good will come of it.
Yeah. And what you can do this more broadly for like people in general, or you can speak to it for yourself, or you can do both. What do you think causes people to disconnect and switch off from that, like innate self-trust?
Oh gosh, how long have we got? But I think
As
I
long
think
as we need.
I think lots of things. I think ultimately, it's a bigger societal question.
Mm.
I've got a 6-year-old at school at the moment, and if you look at school systems, like the systems that we grow up in, we're we're taught to be logical. We're taught that being clever is the only way of being. You know,
Yeah.
think rules, regulations, living within frameworks is what we're taught. And so
Yeah.
that naturally means that we switch off from other parts of us.
Yeah.
I do a lot of work around what I call balanced leadership. I work in corporate as well as coach. And there's something really powerful, I think, around the fact that we've all got femininity and masculinity within us, and recognizing that we need both of those things to work in harmony for us to kind of really work well. And I think the feminine characteristics, when I talk about feminine characteristics, I'm talking about intuition, rest, slowing down, reflection. It's just undervalued, not only in a corporate workplace, but in society. And I just think that's at the heart of it. Like, we just need more support on recognizing logic, challenge, delivery is one way, but there is other ways of being as well.
Yeah. And I think those things that you just talked about then, yes, they are undervalued, but in many spaces, it goes further than that. They're like actively frowned upon. Like, this is not okay. Rest is not okay. I'll sleep when I'm dead. All of this kind of stuff that gets completely ingrained in us. And this might be me going down a rabbit hole, but I also think if you think about it from a real young age, we also get taught what to think, how to think. We get taught a certain version of history. We get taught all of these different things, and we're not encouraged to challenge or question. Like, can you imagine being at school and a teacher talking about stuff and you challenging it or questioning it or asking, I remember I obviously did have a bit of feist in me. So I did A-level maths, and this maths teacher had taught something. And then I'd done my homework, and then she'd marked it wrong. And we happened to have this maths textbook that had got the answers in the back. And then I went into the back and I was like, but my answer was right. And I remember going to the class, and I actually told her I wasn't going to her maths lessons anymore. was about 17. I was like, I'm not coming to your maths lessons anymore because you're just confusing me and you're teaching me the wrong stuff. And I'd gone and found a different maths teacher to go to like other lessons in my free period. And I mean, you can imagine the response. She was like, you will not leave this classroom. You will come in here and you will sit down. And I went in there and I sat down because that's what good girls do. And we have all of these messages over our lives of like, don't think for yourself. Don't do all of these pieces. Just do as you're told. Just do as you're told and everything will be fine.
Oh, I just, as you said that, I'm just like, gosh, what like an energy drain, right? Just a complete energy drain. And and it still goes on, right? I still see it in system.
Yeah.
It's a huge part of systems today. And so I think coming back to your original question of self-trust, the more you can lean into trusting yourself, the more that you can challenge those patterns and systems that we've been brought up in.
Yeah. Yeah. Because a lot of those patterns and those systems aren't really doing us any favors and they create a complete disconnection from ourselves.
Mm.
Because the pattern and the system requires us to be productive and busy and doing and overgiving and constantly working and churning. And you've got two young kids, and so you're supposed to have this career where you've got it all and you're in a full-time job and you've got your kids and you're doing all that stuff for them and you're keeping your husband happy and the household's taken care of and all of these different pieces. There's no space in that perfect lifestyle, inverted commas with the fingers for anyone listening, for rest and connecting to yourself and checking in with your intuition and learning self-trust. It's all built up around be disconnected from yourself, get on the treadmill, just be on the treadmill. And that's all we really want is you to just be on the treadmill.
Mm. And give more, 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 right? Kind of on top of that as well. And I think, and that is why, you know, I feel so passionate. And I think completely why I got drawn to you as well, Louise, of really helping people in those places of burnout and overwhelm to find that. And it is possible, it's completely possible. And it takes work, right?
Yeah.
But at first, for the first stage is just recognizing where you're at and that it's okay to still need a bit of help and you don't have to figure out this piece alone.
Yeah. And also having a bit of compassion of like I've just explained then, of like, well, of course this is where I'm at because I'm operating in a completely unnatural way. It might be normal, it might be socially accepted, but it's completely unnatural. And then when our bodies are like, I don't think so, lady. When we experience the burnout, we're like, I failed. I used to be able to work so hard. What's happened to me? Whereas actually our bodies are just fighting back and they're like, you need to listen.
I'm nodding, by the way.
Yeah.
Completely. And I think the kind of coming to my journey a little bit.
Mm,
And one of the hard things to just even get to that point of recognizing was I didn't have role models around me showing me a different way of being. So I didn't
yeah.
even realize until I got sort of burnt out myself that there were other ways. That sounds like so simple, but I was in a corporate system where people just overworked, over delivered.
Yeah.
I grew up with very hardworking, disciplined parents. I went to school where the system pushed, right? So there wasn't actually spaces to see other ways of doing things.
Yeah. So how did you break out? Tell us more.
Wow. So I guess it sort of goes back to, gosh, when was this kind of journey? When I had my first child. So I think people have
Yeah.
heard me talk about this a little bit on this podcast, but I had my first daughter in 2017. And before that, life was I worked in a corporate role. It was enjoyable and I definitely over delivered and over gave. It was manageable to a point. I probably could have done things differently back then, but when I had my daughter, it toppled things, completely toppled things, because there was no space, rest, all of those things that we just talked about to bring it in for myself. And so I was just completely overwhelmed and burnt out. And I didn't know what to do about it. I was on the treadmill of work a crazy day, go home to a baby that wouldn't sleep, and just get up and do it all again. And then at the weekends, it was just a case of, you know, she's yours, she's your responsibility. And you just end up doing like a huge amount of parenting. And so I got sick. I ended up with a temperature. I went to the doctors. I just thought, oh gosh, I've had this cold now for weeks. I just can't
Mm.
shift it. What is going on? And the doctor was like, do you realize you have a really high temperature? And she was like, your eyes are really bloodshot. You don't really look very well. Are you okay? And it was the first time someone had asked me that question in quite a long time. And it was that kind of tumbleweed then of, no, I'm not okay. And then and it just all kind of coming out. And really that was my moment of things need to be different. And I ended up working with a coach, somebody who I really admired in sort of the space of having gone out herself and created some balance in her life. And that was my journey to self-discovery for myself. And really, it was, you talk about, Louise, I reparented myself in some ways.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
taught myself new rules and I created a new rule book for myself. I really challenged some of the systems that I was in. I recognized that there was no way I could continue to do what I was doing and things to continue to be well.
Mm.
I realized I had quite a lot of courageous conversations with those around me around, I really do
Yeah.
need some help. I may not have ever asked for help, but I really
Mm.
do need some help. And that was quite
Yes.
a massive step for me. The perfectionists out there will
Mm.
see that of asking for help.
Yeah.
And so it was
Yeah.
really baby steps, but baby steps over initially like 12, 18 months. And then I had my second child, and things became even more complicated.
Mm.
And at that point, I realized that I really needed quite a different world. When I say world, I needed a different setup in the way I was working.
Yeah.
And I felt like I had to tap into a huge amount of courage to have conversations with people around actually how I wanted my setup to be. The dreams and the aspirations I had, I really wanted to be a reality. And I can, my aspirations was I would like to work more in the leadership development space in the organization I was a part of. I was already in HR, so there was a kind of a natural graduation of steps for that, but that hadn't been done before, and part-time as a senior leader. And I wanted to grow my own coaching business. And I believed it was possible. I just didn't know how I was going to get there. And I just really had to tap into the self-courage and where I worked with some amazing coaches to really kind of set my life in motion to be able to do those things.
And so it's actually a really, really, really big deal to be able to go and have those conversations of like, it's one thing recognizing, okay, this is what I want. And then that can feel like a really, really scary place. So I get for you, it's like you're already in HR and it's a step, but it's also you're in HR, you're very senior within a very big organization, and you're like, hi, so what I'd like to do is more women's leadership development and I'd like to do it part-time. Thanks very much. Like that's actually quite a big deal to get yourself to that place of this is what I want. So how did that become available for you? Because for a lot of people, they might want to have those conversations, but something would stop them.
And it didn't happen overnight. To get to that
Mm.
point, it probably took me about 18 months of
Yeah.
really getting the courage. I think it really started with starting to look after myself.
Mm.
So before I can even figure out what I wanted, I had to actually understand who I was.
Mm.
So I spent a huge amount of time really understanding what is it that I want to do in life. I'd never
Mm.
really asked myself that question because I'd gone on that corporate ladder of I'd fallen into a role, the promotions had happened, which were lovely, but there was never choice, like not true choice in terms of really deciding kind of the stuff that I wanted to do. So really tapping into and really like having conversations with people in my network and my network of like what else is out there and what am I really, really interested in. So really going on like a deep period of self-discovery, loving myself, like truly
Mm.
believing that I deserved this.
Mm.
Like I deserved to have the life that I really wanted. And I was the only one that ultimately could create that for myself. And that took a long time to believe those two things. That doesn't just happen overnight. And then really practicing how I was going to approach some of these conversations. I remember sitting with my coach about a month before I had a conversation with my boss, and she was just like, that's really aggressive. You can't approach it like that. And I'm thinking, oh,
Mm.
I'm never going to figure this out. But practicing, like practically sitting
Yeah.
in front of the mirror, practicing how I was going to show up to those conversations, it really coming from a place of like the heart of like, this is really important, but
Mm.
also being conscious of the corporate organization and what they needed and balancing out data in terms of where there were gaps in the organization,
Yeah.
but the personal passion that I was bringing, but prepping, like properly prepping those
Mm.
presentations and those discussions that I was going to have. And then even when I'd had the conversation, which I remember, gosh, like it was like first day of school, like going into the office,
Mm.
the nerves and the anticipation of like how I was going to have this conversation, not having a yes straight away. I waited 2.5 weeks before I got any feedback.
Mm.
And being comfortable with sitting with space, and trusting that something good would come of space. And that was hard, right? For someone who was like results driven and loved expectations of things just being there on the spot, that didn't come. But there was lots of conversation that needed to happen above me or around me. And that was out of my hands then, and just trusting that I'd done enough to kind of support that next direction. But I think the other thing as well that was a really important part on this journey was realizing that I had more gold in the pot than I realized. You know,
Mm.
all the stuff that I've done to date, reputation, the work that I've done, the things that I delivered, that doesn't go away with a new job. That is
Yes.
there. And people often don't make that connection. It's like,
Mm.
how do I jump from this to this? There's no jump, right? There is the continuation in a way of like, how do you take all this stuff you've done, this beautiful stuff you've done, and then
Yeah.
just build on it? And
Yes.
someone said to me, you have more power in the pot than you realized. And that was a real aha
Mm.
moment for me of,
Mm.
she was like, you need to start spending some of that gold that you've put in the bank. And I was like,
Mm.
really? But actually thinking about it
Yes.
in that way of like doing it in a fair way, and preparing for those conversations, but just really trusting actually, yeah, I've got the right to have these discussions and I have the backing of the people around me from the work that I've done, and just leaning into that a little bit.
Yeah, I love that. And so what I want to do is I want to just pick up on a few different pieces from this because I think it's really, really important that we just cement it in. Because I think sometimes people get to this point of burnout or feeling like things are kind of burning down or this kind of destruction phase and they see it as a real negative. Now, obviously, because of the kind of work that I do and my background, it's rare for me to work with someone who hasn't been in that kind of experience before. They don't necessarily come to me in burnout, but they're either skirting around it or they've had it in the past, right? But what I see is that for many, many, many of us, we need that point of, I can't carry on like this before we make a change. And whilst in the moment it might feel horrendous, I think often you look back on it and are like, that's actually the wake up call that I needed in order to get me to here. So I think I just want to just put that out there for anyone who's listening who might be in or around that space. It's going to be okay. And then the other piece is, and I think this is so, so important that you said, is it took you about 18 months because we all want a quick fix and they don't exist. But also that fundamental first step before all the prep, before the sitting in front of the mirror and practicing the conversation, all of those really important things was getting to know yourself and asking that question of who am I? Because most of us completely lose the thread on that one. And getting to that place where you can say, I love myself. I nearly cried when you said that. Of like, I love myself and I deserve this. I deserve to have the life I want. And I think that is so, so important that we get to that place because it's so easy for us to carry wounds from the past or other things where we feel that we don't deserve it. And then we stop ourselves putting ourselves forward. So
And
I
it's
just wanted to
such,
highlight that. Yeah.
thank you, Louise. And I think that is such an important point, because the many of the women I work with were told, often the stories that they're told is don't boast, ego doesn't have a place. And this isn't coming from an ego place. This is just, everyone's amazing. It's just finding your amazing talents and finding a way to weave that into the world. But it's okay to talk about it. There's a real aha moment often for people around, okay, I can, I can celebrate my successes, I can celebrate my wins, and of course I can celebrate what I'm bringing to the world.
I also love your point about the transferable skills. So for me, I did a 12 months secondment when I was at KPMG in 2015 that didn't have anything to do with law. And that was when the penny dropped for me. Like, oh, actually, I am not trapped because I didn't just do like, a lot of people they do law and they do corporate law and then they go and work in house and they've got all of these different options. I didn't even just do tax law. I did VAT litigation. So it was like, so people in the States, VAT is our sales tax. So it was like a very like it was just so niche. And I was like, I'm stuck in this forever. And then just realizing, oh, I'm not stuck in this forever. We've got so many transferable skills. And then recognizing, because I think this is the most important point, because everything you've just described, I imagine a lot of people could come to you or could decide to come and do this work, and they're in the burnout stage and they're like, can you help me plan these conversations? Because I need to get out. And it's just that they kind of the reality is, yes, absolutely. And part of this process is going to be a prolonged period of you getting to know yourself again, connecting back to who you are, learning to trust yourself, learning to follow your own rules and your own rule book, and kind of leave behind all of this stuff so that you are then ready and empowered to have those conversations.
I think that's so true. And we all know those conversations where people show up and they really know their stuff, right? And have done their research and are confident in what they're saying. And don't rush it, don't rush those conversations, because unprepared, unplanned gets felt and seen. There is, someone once said to me, you have time for all your dreams. And I hold that dearly, because there's always time for all our dreams. But we're just in this, like, back to the kind of societal piece of everything needs to feel like tomorrow.
So the road to self-trust is paved with gold, as I'm hearing, more gold than we realise. What for you do you see as the key components?
Self-trust.
Yeah.
I think it's what we've talked about already today. The first bit is, who are you? Like, who are you really? Really getting to know yourself, trusting in yourself, but also recognizing the gifts that you've been given in life. What is it that you are naturally amazing at? And often, sometimes you don't even recognize that in yourself and others see it within you. So just, the piece that I said around starting to ask for help, one of the things for help for me was I went out to people who I really trusted and said, what do you admire about me? Where do you see me? Because people have such wisdom that they may not share because we just don't ask those questions. So really starting there. I think the other thing is, like, where do you want to go? It may be you don't have to have it all figured out, and that's a big question, but just some sense, like, of where you want to start putting yourself out into the world. I'm not sure where my journey is going to end up, right? But I just know that what I do know is I really want to support women, and that's just kind of core of what I'm doing right now. And I'm having fun with that. And then I truly believe that it'll figure itself out. The journey's already mapped out for me. I'm just on it, and it will just get revealed to me as I keep going through this.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Well,
like for myself, I mean,
your journey.
Yeah. I agree that you're yeah, both of our journeys, they've already mapped out. We just got to keep taking the next step.
Exactly. And even if it's the wrong step, there's another, you can go another direction, right? So just kind of leaning into the self-trust. Letting go of the rule book. I've told you a little bit about that today. Often we don't even recognize those rules that are written out for us. I genuinely didn't believe that you could rest and not be seen as lazy. That's a massive one in my rule book. It was always just work really hard, work really, really hard, to the point of breaking, right? But actually, what I've learned is the more I rest, actually, the better I am and the better work I'm putting out into the world.
Yeah.
Tap into courage. You talked about that, Louise, today, but I think it's a massive one of courage. And we talk about confidence so much. It's not something you do or don't have. It's something you have to actively build and work on. And somebody described it as a muscle to me a few weeks ago, and that really sort of sat with me of like, yes, and like small acts of building that muscle. You go to the gym, it takes a few months, right, to build that kind of inner stamina and strength.
Absolutely.
And then I think the final one really for me is around really trusting your decisions, like trusting your senses. And that doesn't just happen, because that often is switched off for a lot of us. But it comes with practice. And the more you trust your senses, the more you begin to see, oh, that's the journey and that's where I need to go. And that's really what's happening. So it's a beautiful place to kind of do work from when you've really tapped into it.
Yeah. And I love that. And I completely agree with what you just said then about that bit can be switched off. The other thing that I think people can find is your intuition can get hijacked by other people. By which I mean, if you've had, I don't know, like a codependent relationship, or you've been heavily influenced by someone, their thoughts and their way of being and their rules can dominate your mind. And so then it can actually be really, really challenging to separate into, oh, okay, well, what is it that I think and what is it that I think I should think? And I think this is where this kind of great unraveling and coming back to, okay, well, who am I? What do I want? What do I stand for? And what of this is me and what of this isn't me? Okay, well, what of this that isn't me do I want to shed? And then what comes in the space? And that I think is where the magic happens.
Completely. And it's very easy to get intertwined into other journeys, right?
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
in corporate spaces, it happens. You get a vision, you kind of, is it your vision? Is it the company's vision? How does that kind of all come together? And then in family systems, like, it's very complicated, the kind of things that we are told to think. And it takes time. It takes time to kind of like pull those two pieces apart. But that question of who am I is, I think, the biggest question of life. And if you can spend some time with that and really get to the heart of it, I think that everything flows from there in terms of the self-trust and the rebuilding of what you want from life.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And then what you've said as well about having someone to help you, having someone help you to tease out, well, what is this? What of this is mine? What of this isn't mine? Having someone to help you think about, well, what are my rules? So that you'll know, because you've done loads of programs with me now. I spend a lot of time with people helping them look at their rule books and all the rest of it. But it was 2019 when my first coach says to me something or another, she was like, well, what are your rules? What rules do you have? And I was like, oh, I don't really have any rules, I don't think. Don't really have any rules. Oh my God, so many rules. And you're right, we're just completely blissfully unaware because it's just our normal day to day. We just go through it in this like unfiltered state and we're not really aware of it. So just having someone to help you to tease some of that out and be like, oh shit, this is not a rule that I want to follow anymore.
And so that's really hard. Like, I remember some of the
Yeah.
rules being presented to me through the work we've done, and I put it in a box for a while because I was like, that's really hard. I'll come to that when I've got the energy for it, and I'll get to it. But it's just knowing that sometimes you have to just sit with the acknowledgement for a while to even
Yeah.
acknowledge it, right? It's
Yeah.
big work.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, um, you've done this work and I love the fact that you are a shining example of the work. Um, I personally believe that when we do this work with other people, we have an obligation to be a product of our product, right? I really, really do believe we can only take another person as far as we have been willing to take ourselves. Because if we've got blocks, if we've got stuff we haven't worked through, if we've got areas or challenges or stuff that just hasn't been processed, not only will we be unable to support someone else with it, we just won't know the questions to ask. We won't know the things to tease out of them to help them work through it because they'll say something and we'll just agree with them because we've got the same blocks. So I love the fact that you have dived into this so much in so much detail, in order to, well, for yourself first, right? We do this work for ourselves first, but also so that you can then be such a safe pair of hands for the people that you work with. And I would just like to thank you on behalf of the healthy coaching community that you have put yourself in this place because I think it's so, so valuable and so, so important.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you, and I'm passing that back because genuinely, I wouldn't have delved into some of these big pieces without you. So, it's been a really incredible journey, and I just feel like I wish that everybody could have this opportunity to tap into this.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing is that most people do have this opportunity and they have to choose it Because you can look at you now in your life and you can look at my life now and be like, oh, isn't it? Oh, look, they both seem to be doing really well. And Charlotte's got this job and she really enjoys it. And she's got this coaching business. Oh, and Louise moved to the country and all of these different pieces. We had to go through some fucking dark shit in order to get here. And it didn't happen as fast as we wanted it to. And we had to keep going. And that's the truth of it. But it's so, so worth it. It's so, so worth it. Because it's
Oh
like,
yeah.
do I want to spend a bit of time feeling a bit uncomfortable in order to then be able to feel the way I want? Or do I want to carry on the burnout treadmill feeling like shit?
Oh yes. Well, we've had some blubbering sessions, right? I've had some very ugly tears along the way, completely. Um, and when you go through those points, it progresses then into something more beautiful the other side. And you kind of say that and be like, yeah. But really, like, unless you kind of delve into some of this stuff, it won't change. It just genuinely won't change. And this is the route to it, right? Of spending time with this stuff. And also just, for me, it's the ripple effect. That's the most impactful thing. It's not just about doing the work for myself.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it will just have the ripple effect for my clients, it has the ripple effect for my children, it has the ripple effect on the people I work with. And that just feels good to be leading
Yeah.
from that place.
Yeah. And then another ripple effect that I would just like to reflect back to you is within the group spaces that you are in of mine. You also get to be, not that your life's perfect or it's always rosy, but you also get to be an inspiration for other people who aren't quite where you are on your journey yet. And they can look at you and be like, there are other ways that are possible. So I think you're right, the ripples are absolutely everywhere.
Thank you. Wow.
So
We talked about at the beginning, those role not that I'm suggesting I'm a role model, but just finding those people that you admire in those spaces are not always easy to find. So,
yeah,
when I found them, I've hung on to those relationships because they've been really important to me.
yeah. I was asked on a podcast last year when I was a guest. They were like, who do you look up to? Who's a really positive role model for you? And I just kind of paused. And she was like, oh, I think often this happens with the perfectionists because you hold people to such high standard. I'm like, no, literally, I just don't think there are particularly very many good role models out there of like that people actually live a life that I think is a healthy life that I would want to emulate in all the different ways. I was like, I don't think it's perfectionism. I think as a society we're just realistic. So you're right. So if we can find these places and spaces of like, oh, I like the way that's going down, and then we can put ourselves in the spaces to learn some of that, then I think it's really, really helpful.
Agreed.
So one of the things that I think is amazing about what you've done, Charlotte, is connecting into your self-trust and the magic that is you. Like it's fed throughout this entire conversation of you leaning into, I deserve this. I've got these good gifts. And no one is ever, ever, ever going to accuse you of being an arrogant or a boastful person. It's just not who you are. But being able to be like, this is what I've got to offer and it's really good. And I think it's so, so powerful. And I would love for you to spend a little bit of time now just sharing how you are bringing this to those who want it in a coaching space, because I think it's a really, really exciting offering that you've got coming up.
Thank you. So I do one-on-one coaching, but what I am going to be launching from autumn is a small coaching community. And I say small, I want to put the emphasis on small because I really believe in creating spaces that feel very safe, and making sure that people feel very welcome and also make the progress that they really want to progress. So I'm launching a community titled Trusting and Connecting with the Magic of You.
Love it.
The plan is for people to come together for 3 months. So we're looking 6 slots, 3 months, and it will be 2 1-hour sessions a month, which will consist of a teaching piece. I say teaching very loosely, my learnings, some wisdom to share with the group, and then coming back and doing group coaching, because what I found being in group coaching spaces is often there's so much wisdom that's held with the community that come together. And outside of that coaching community, I'll also be giving everybody that comes to the program one-on-one support. So they will have they'll have 1 session a month. So they'll get 3 hours one-to-one coaching with me across the program. And the cost of the program will be 1,500. So that's for 3 months. That is for 6 hours of coaching and 3 hours of one-on-one coaching with myself. And the things that we will focus on is very much what we just talked about today, recognizing all the beautiful gifts you bring to the world, learning into and trusting in your yearnings and dreams, letting go of the rule book, experiencing that inner confidence and turning that into courage, and trusting with all your senses.
I love that. And who would be really well suited for this program? Because it sounds great, but like, you know, who are you really speaking to in this?
So I am speaking to women. That's kind of my area of I guess my area of wisdom and expertise. But also I'm open to mums, non-mums, anyone that feels drawn to the work. People who ultimately are either in a space of burnout or feeling overwhelmed and want to have a different way of being. So if that speaks to people, then just come and have a chat with me. We can explore a little bit more of what that's going to look like. And I already have 2 incredible ladies in that community. So we're just looking forward to others joining, and then we'll get going in the autumn.
Lovely. And so just I'm putting my marketing hat on now, putting my thing on. So where might a person be right now in their life? How are they feeling? Because it's really easy for you to talk about a different way of being. I know exactly what you mean. You know exactly what you mean. But like, where might they be now? How might they be feeling? How might they be experiencing work or home? And what's the journey that you're going to take them on?
So I think sort of the people that are coming into this community already, it really, as I said, it's people that are in a space of just feeling lost, overwhelmed with life. And what I mean by that is women who are trying to balance the chaos of life, or being a working parent. I have 2 little ones, so I understand that, and having sort of a corporate role as well. But people who feel stuck, like genuinely stuck. I've got this role. It gives me flexibility. It may be not that challenging, but it kind of fits my life right now. But really, if I'm truthful with myself, I want something else. I really have this desire for something else. So if that speaks to you in terms of those yearnings and needs that you have, but just not tapping into them, and where will we get to? Everyone's going to set individual intentions. Obviously, everyone's going to be on an individual journey. But what I really hope is that we get to inner trust. Over those 3 months, we really understand who we are and what we want in a trust, and start putting some really practical steps in place towards what you desire for the future.
I love that. So if you are listening to this and you feel called, go and check Charlotte out. We will have stuff in the show notes that means you can go and find her. I love the idea of this program. The other thing that I would like to add, because neither of us have touched on it today, is Charlotte is also trained in nervous system work via the somatic school. So when Charlotte talks about holding a safe space and it being a small group, it will also be a safe space, because Charlotte's not going to fuck you up, because she actually knows what she's doing. And I think that's kind of important to say.
Yeah, no, I think, thank you, Louise. When safety to me is the core of everything. If you don't feel safe, then we're not going to make the progression. And so spending time with you all, really understanding what safety means for you and what you need in terms of safety, will be a really important part of us coming into this community.
I love that. So thank you so much for being here today. Is there anything else that you want to add before we wrap up?
Thank you. No, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to come in today. And I think just in terms of where people can find me, I'm very active on LinkedIn, so drop me a DM. But also I have a website, so Louise will put that in the show notes, the details, I'm sure, so you can contact me via my email address. But if you're at the moment of, I'm just not sure, I just want to find out more as well, just come and have a chat. I'd love to have a cup of coffee with you and a cup of tea, and we can just explore that a little bit more. So thank you.
And throw your website out there just in case people are like, I'm on a walk, I can't be asked to go in the show notes.
So it is www.charlottewilliamscoaching.co.uk.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So, heads up for everybody else, this podcast will be having a little bit of a summer break. So, whilst there is a little episode that talks about said summer break that will go live on the 1st of August, this is me done now until September. So, if you've enjoyed this one, go back, find the previous episode that I did with Charlotte. There's loads and loads of interviews. I think we've got something like 70 podcast episodes that I've now done over the last 20 or so months. So, go and dive in, have fun. If you would like to get in touch with me over the summer, I will not be on social media. So just come and find me via email. Let's be humans and have some real connection. So Charlotte, thank you so much for being here today. And I will see all of you guys in September.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Before you go, I so hope that you enjoyed today's episode. And if you did, I'd like to ask you a favour, please, because the way that this podcast grows and the way that more people get to benefit from these materials is that more people find it. And that means that subscribes and likes and shares are so, so important to this space. So, my ask of you, if you got value from the podcast today, is give it a review, give it a like, share it with a friend, and make sure that you are subscribed. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you being here. And I look forward to continuing to support you to do life, business, relationships, and all of it your way.